Hello everyone, welcome back to KaushalBioPrep. With today's video lecture, we are going to start animal behavior. And in today's lecture, I am going to give you a brief about what is animal behavior and certain introduction to the topic. So let's get started. So it is the scientific study of the characteristic behavior pattern and the study of the animal behavior and social organization from a biological perspective. So animal behavior is basically considered under the study called ethology. So ethology is the study of behavior. So in this particular section, we discuss the behavioral pattern, animal behavior pattern and their social organization also, and we are going to discuss all of this with the biological perspective, how the behavior basically develops. So ethology consists of two words, ethos and logos. So ethos means habit and logos means study. So it's deals with the study of the animal behavior, and it is a branch of biology that analyzes the reaction of an animal to its environment. So that means we basically, when we study ethology, we analyze the reaction of certain animals to certain environment condition, and we try to determine the specific cause for that behavior and the effect of the relationship between the animal action and the events and condition experienced by the animal. So basically this is a link up between the animal and the environment. Due to certain environment, there will be certain behavioral pattern of the animal. So we are going to study about the cause of that behavior and what are the conditions that are impacting that behavior and what is that certain type of behavior. So this is all about the study of the animal behavior. Now the most significant starting point in the basically the understanding of the animal behavior came from the word of the Charles Darwin's work. In this timeline, he was also known as the father of scientific study of animal behavior. He is still known as the father of scientific study of animal behavior. So Darwin basically wrote two books regarding this. First is The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex in 1871, and then there is one more book, that is The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals. In both of these books, Darwin talk about the behavior of the animals. So that is why he made most significant contribution to to the starting of this particular branch. So his theory of natural selection also set the stage for consideration of animals' behavior, and he believed in the theory of evolutionary continuity of man and other animals. Right? So the modern discipline of ethology is generally considered to have begun during the 1930s with the work of Dutch biologist named Nicholas Tinbergen and the Austrian biologist named Konrad Lorenz, and there was one more with him, that is the Carl von Frisch. So these three people are very very important to set the stage for the modern discipline of ethology. So Konrad Lorenz and Nico Tinbergen, they formulated a number of concepts on which the study of the animal behavior has been based. So whatever concepts we are going to study in the coming lecture, they are based basically on the formulation of these scientists. Now let's talk about the classification of the behavioral patterns. So there are three basic categories of behavioral pattern of animals. And number one is the instinctive behavior, or it is also called the fixed action pattern, that is the FAP. Then the second one is the learning behavior, and then finally we come to the complex behavior. One by one we are going to discuss each category. So we are starting with the first one, that is the instinctive behavior or fixed action pattern. So instinctive behaviors are genetically inherited. First of all, you need to understand this. They are genetically inherited and characteristics that impel animals to behave in a certain fixed way. That means they are fixed in the DNA or the RNA, whatever the genetic material is, right? So they are fixed in the genes of the animal, and they are basically these characteristics they impel animal to behave in certain way, in a fixed way, and it is referred to as the fixed action pattern for that manner only. And there somehow they are also somewhere they are also written as the innate behavior or inborn behavior or the inherent behavior, because they are embedded in the genetic material of the animal. So instinct is generally described as a pattern of inherited preset behavior. So you must have heard about a word called instinct. So what is instinct? Instinct is a pattern of inherited preset behavioral response which develops along with the developing nervous system, right? Then it is a familiar behavior which evolves gradually over the generation by selection. So this is the same kind of behavior that you will see in certain animals, and it will evolve gradually over the generation by selection to match an animal's behavior to its environment. So it may be defined as a behavior which does not require learning or practice. This is very important. You need to understand the instinctive behavior or fixed action pattern. They are not learned or not practiced. They are fixed in the genetic makeup of the organism. So they appear spontaneously at the first instance of its need, right? Now, in the instinctive behavior, in the animal kingdom, there are a number of behaviors pattern which are depicted in the genes. For example, the courtship display and the mating in most of the animals. The courtship display, for example, in case of the peacock, the dance done by the peacock, that is embedded in the genetics of the particular animal, right? The feeding patterns, right? The nest building, the parental care, singing, wing cleaning, territoriality, aggression, construction of a web by the spiders, and the construction of the nest by the birds. All these behaviors are not learned or practiced. These are the behaviors which are fixed in their genetic makeup. So they are called the instinctive behavior, right? And there are three criteria for instinctive behaviors. Number one, they are unlearned. So you don't learn these behavior. That is why they are called inborn, right? They are adaptive, and they are the characteristic of a species. For example, a particular species of spider web construct their web in a certain way, and that is special for that particular species. So they are characteristic of the species, right? So this is all about the instinctive behavior. Now coming to the second one, that is called the learning behavior. So learned behavior developed during an animal's lifetime. Basically, they develop this behavior through learning. So animal with more complex brain, they exhibit more behaviors that are a result of the learning. However, the behaviors of the insects, spiders, and other arthropods is mostly instinctive behavior. So you get the point. It is basically behavior is dependent on the how much your brain has been developed so far. So in the evolutionary ladder, if you talk about the insect, spider, and arthropods, so they mostly have instinctive behaviors. But if you go above the ladder, you see fish, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and mammals, they all learn. So learning is a result of experience or practice. And learning is important for animals because it allows them to respond to changing situations. In a changing environment, animals that have the ability to learn a new behavior are more likely to survive, right? So if the environment changes and animal learn from it that the conditions are changing, so they will adapt accordingly, and it is very, very important for their survival. So this is especially important for animals with a long lifespan, so that they can adapt to the changing environment. And learning can also modify the instinct. This is a very important line, right? For example, if you see a grouse or a quail chicks, sorry, there is no picture in the PPT, I'm sorry about that, I'll just explain it with the words. So if you see a quail chick, they leave their nest the day they hatch. So the day they hatch from the egg, the quail chicks, they leave the nest. They can run and find food, but they cannot fly. So these particular organisms, the grouse and the quail chicks, they leave their nests the day they hatch from the egg. They run, they find food, but they cannot fly. When something moves above them, they instantly crouch and keep perfectly still until the danger has passed. So if for example, if a quail chick is passing hereby, it is the if the this dot represent the quail chick. So if something passes over this chick, so this particular chick will crouch and keep perfectly still. It will not move at all until the danger has passed, until the moving object has passed over it. And they will crouch without moving even if the falling object is only a leaf. So they don't know whether the falling object is harmful to them or not, but their response is they will crouch. Older birds, compared to these ones, the older birds have learned the leaves will not harm them, but they freeze when a hawk moves overhead. So that means the older birds have learned it, right? And you see, the crouching is an instinct that they need to crouch when something passed over them. But with the time, with passage of time, the older birds have learned that leaves will not harm them, so they will not freeze when a leaf fall. But When a hawk moves overhead, they have learned that it is a harmful thing, so they will freeze, they will crouch. So learning is the modification of the stereotype behaviors or the acquisition of the new behavior pattern based upon the past experience, right? So therefore we say that learned behavior is also called modifiable behavior or acquired behavior, right? So instinct, basically you can modify it through learning also. Now, what kind of learning behaviors are there? So, the various level of learning found in animal kingdom have been classified ethologically in several ways that are recognized by the animal psychologists. So, basically, this work has been done by animal psychologists. So, they have, categorized the learning behavior into 7 categories. So, number 1 is habituation. Then comes the imprinting. Then there is conditional reflex or associative learning. Then you have the trial and error learning. There is latent learning, insight learning, and reasoning. So we'll be discussing each with some example. Number 1 is habituation. So it is the simplest kind of learning. It is non-associative. So this is a process in which an animal learns to inhibit a response. That means a response which it will not do again. Inhibit a response, and it is considered to be the most primitive and widespread form of learning. So habituation is the most primitive way of learning. So a learning to ignore a stimuli in the environment and not associated with any reward or punishment. This is very important. Habituation is not associated with any kind of reward or punishment. Animals tend to do something in association in association with the reward or the punishment of that behavior. That is not an habit. Okay, excuse me. Let's take an example. So for example, if a garden snail is allowed to crawl across a surface and the surface is trapped sharply, right, the snail will rapidly withdraw into the shell. That means if this is the surface and there is a garden snail which is basically going in this direction, so the surface is trapped here sharply, so the snail will rapidly withdraw into its shell, right? After a few moments it will come out again and continue moving. ऐसे ही होगा. So if you tap over here once, the snail will basically go back into the shell. After a few minutes it will come out again and continue moving. Tapping the surface again will cause it to stop, withdraw, wait, and then reemerge. Again you do this. So this response will continue for a while, but gradually time taken to re-emerge diminishes, and ultimately the snail will not respond to the tapping at all, because snail has learned that the tapping is not doing anything to the snail. It is not harmful. You get that? So basically there is no reward, there is no harm to the punishment or the harm to the snail, but snail has learned that tapping has nothing to do with it, so it will keep on moving without stopping after a while. So this is a habituation behavior because it is not associated with reward or punishment. This next kind of learning behavior is imprinting. So imprinting is a specialized form of learning that is seen clearly in many kinds of birds during their early period of life, and when the early period is over, which is basically called the critical learning period, the bird are unable to learn. And this is a very good example we have for it. A young duck will normally follow their mother around soon after they hatch. For example, you have the duck egg. When the duck hatches, so this duckling basically start following the mother as soon as it hatches from the egg. So the behavior is a result of hatching, and apparently imprinting, which we are talking, will occur only for a short time after the bird is hatched. So what basically happens, when the duckling hatched from the egg, it sees its mother, so it start following the mother, right? But if you replace the mother with any other object, so the duckling will start following that object. For duckling, that object is its mother. But if that critical period of time, for say it is 10 minutes since the egg hatches, after 10 minutes if it does not see the mother or the object moving, so it is not exposed to the adult bird for some days, so it will never occur, it will never follow that bird. So it has been done with some experimentation. So imprinting is prevented from occurring by hatching the egg in an incubator. So you are not doing it in a natural environment, you are doing it in an incubator. and you're not exposing the young birds to an adult bird for some days, and it never occurs. So imprinting never occurs, right? So it will never follow the the older bird or the adult bird. So imprinting is associated with the critical period in which the particular pattern can develop. Next in the line is conditional reflex or associative learning, or the learned reflexes. What are these? So conditioned reflex is substituting one stimulus for another in bringing about a type of response. So you are basically replacing one stimulus with another, and you have a response for that. So in other words, you see, if you speak neurologically, when a nerve impulse travel in a reflex which involves brain association neurons to decide on what response is to be made to the original stimulus, the response is called conditioned reflex. For example, this is a very simple example that you see. Saliva secretion occurs by simple reflex caused by the touch of the food inside the mouth, or sometimes just by the smell of the food, right? So that smell or the odor or the touch of the food will affect your receptors, which stimulates the salivary glands, so that the salivation can occur, right? So this is a very simple example of the conditioned reflex. For example, if you I can give you another example. If you have a hankering for pizza per se, right? So you like eating pizzas, and if you are hungry and you smell that somebody open a box of pizza, so you can smell that pizza is there, so you will start salivation for that. So the salivation will start occurring, and it is because of it is like kind of a reflex. Because, and why it is called associative learning also, because you have associated, your brain has associated the smell with the taste, right? We are going to have pizzas. So this is a very common example. But associated learning or conditioned reflex is of two types. One is the classical conditioning, and another one is the instrumental conditioning. So what are the difference between these two? So basically, if you see these two, the classical and instrumental conditioning, so I can give you two examples for these and what are the difference between this. So in classical conditioning, let's sort this here. So in classical conditioning, and there is instrumental conditioning. So in classical conditioning, what happens, the association is between two stimulus. So basically stimulus to stimulus association is there. But in instrumental conditioning, the conditioning is based on the response, right? So there is response conditioning. Basically what happens, what is the difference? The difference is that in classical conditioning, the response is controlled by the stimulus only. So the stimulus should be there to have the response. But in instrumental conditioning, the response is not controlled by the stimulus, but the consequences of the response, right? I'll give you a very simple example. If you always ring a bell before giving your dog food, right? So you ring the bell and then give dog food. So every time you ring the bell, the dog will start salivating, because the neurons is conditioned in a manner that when the bell is being rung, there will be food, right? So a dog salivating at the sound of a bell after it is repeatedly paired with the food, it is classical conditioning. So the stimulus is bell. But in instrumental conditioning, for example, if you have a rat in a cage, and there is a lever attached to the cage, so when rat press this lever, there is the window will open and rat will receive food, let's say that, right? So rat is here, this is the lever. When rat is going to press the lever, the window will open and it will receive some food. Okay, so now with repeated action, rat knows that that when he presses the lever, there will be food incoming. So rat will press the lever in order to receive the food. So in this case, food is what? Food is the consequence of pressing the lever. So this is instrumental conditioning. So the difference is, in instrumental conditioning, the behavior type is voluntary, isn't it? Rat is going to press the lever or not, right? But in case of the classical conditioning, the behavior is involuntary, because the salivation is not under the control of the dog, isn't it? So this is the difference between classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning. And if you see it on the basis of learners behavior, for example in this case dog, in this case rat. So in classical conditioning the behavior of learner is passive, because the stimulus itself elicit the response, the learner has not done anything. But in case of instrumental conditioning, the learner's response is active, because rat has to press the lever in order to get the food. So this is the difference between these two type of associated learning. I hope you understand the difference. The next one is the trial and error learning. This is also called selective learning. This is very simple. So trial and error learning results when instrumental conditioning, which I have explained earlier, is made more complex by introducing several variables. For example, again we take the example of rat in a cage. We have lever number 1 and there is lever number 2. So if a rat presses the lever number 1, the food will be there. If it presses the lever number 2, nothing is there. So it will, a rat will move here and there and sometimes press lever 2, sometimes press lever 1, and after repeated action it will eventually learn that by pressing lever 2 I will have food. So that is trial and error learning, right? Then comes the next one, that is the latent learning. So latent learning is acquired when there is no particular reward or punishment. So there is no reward, no punishment, which is associated with animals' activity, and many animals appear to be naturally curious, exploring their surrounding in a great detail. So basically the latent learning is associated with curiosity, neither with reward nor with punishment. So example, when finches are released into a aviary, for example, they will investigate every nook and cranny until they are thoroughly familiar with their new home. If you not take example of finches, even any other animal, for example if a fish is released in a very small pond, for example, so it will investigate every corner of that pond and investigate every corner thoroughly, so that it gets familiar with their new home basically, right? And another example is when a hive of honeybee is closed up and moved to a new location, then it is reopened. So many of the emerging bees appears to perform a short orientation flights lasting only to a minute or two, and they emerge and fly in every widening circle, and around the hive they basically move and they learn to recognize their surroundings. So this is latent learning. They are understanding now the surrounding of their new home, right? So this is not associated with reward or punishment, just the curiosity. For example, if I go into a zoo, for example, right, and if I am free there, I will go here and there, I will understand where the reptilian section is, where the amphibian section is. So that is it all about latent learning. Then comes the final one, that is the insight learning. So in not the final one, the fifth one, we have 7. So the instant learning, the most sophisticated kind of learning, is called the insight learning, not instant learning, sorry, insight learning. And what is it? It is the ability to use knowledge obtained in one context to solve a problem in different contexts, and it is very commonly seen in mammals, right? So example, the chimpanzee who pokes a stick into an ant nest allows the ant to climb on the stick and then lick them off, and it is using insight learning if it has reasoned beforehand that the stick would make a suitable tool for capturing ant, isn't it? So in insight learning, you use the knowledge which is obtained in one context and you solve another problem using that knowledge, right? So insight learning, sometimes it is also termed as intelligence. In human species, insight learning is the most highly developed learning, and it is also seen in chimpanzee likewise. However, the birds such as crow also possess this type of learning. You all must have heard the story of the crow, the thirsty crow. So in that particular story, the crow basically use the insight learning to get the water. Now the next one is the reasoning. So reasoning is of top of all modes of adaptive learning. Reasoning capacity includes the ability to solve complex problems with something more than simple trial and error habit or stimulus or response modification. So it is a top module And it is not as simple as trial and error or stimulus response modification. So it is basically capacity to solve the complex problem. For example, reasoning is the ability to use past experience and logical deductions to solve a new complex problem. A very common example, if we include in reasoning, for example, I can give you a scenario. For example, there were two boys and one go out to buy some snacks. How many boys left in the room? Right, this is a very very simple example, so you will say one. How do you know that? You have ability to see that if 2 minus 1 is 1, isn't it? But this is a very simple example. You have complex problem also like that. So reasoning is the top module for adaptive behavior. Now the next one is the complex behavior. So if we talk about the complex behavior, I think we are forgetting one from the learned behavior. Let me just go back. Okay, so we have done habituation, imprinting, associated learning, trial, insight learning, reasoning. Okay, I think I have just marked wrong in that side. We have done yeah, we are done with the learning. Now let's come to the complex behavior. So complex behavior, they can incorporate any kind of reflexes. For example, the swallowing reflex is a culmination of the elaborate food seeking behavior, and the complex behavior is a product of an integrated series of changes in cell chemistry, intimidated by the receptor cells, carried on by the sensory interneurons and motor and cell and muscles. For example, ये छोड़ के अगर मैं आपको ये वाला समझाऊँ तो swelling reflex. So you pick up the food, you have food in your mouth, for example. Now you are going to swallow the food. Now what is going to happen? When you swallow the food, certain muscles in your food pipe, they contract and relax. That is basically the peristalsis of the food, and food is basically moved through the food pipe. So that swallowing action has certain series of changes, and that those changes are initiated by certain cell receptors, because they understand basically the cell receptor receives a kind of the stimulus, which is your food in your mouth. It is a stimulus, and when you try to swallow the food, the certain muscles start contracting and relaxing simultaneously, so the peristalsis can occur. So this is a complex behavior, but because it involves a lot of changes. And another example is singing in a cricket or a bird, where the body works due to the coordination of the nerve, muscles and sense organs. Same goes for swallowing. When a bird sings, the nerves, the neurons work all together with the muscles and the organ involved in for the particular action. So the properties of the complex behavior basically includes incorporate many kind of reflexes. So the properties of reflexes and the complex behavior are three properties. First is the latency, then comes the summation, and finally there is inhibition. What is latency? Latency is delay between giving a stimulus and seeking its effect. For example, when a dog encounters a painful stimulus, the latency between encountering of stimulus and showing a flexion reflex क्या? Withdrawal of the leg from that. This can be seen in an example with human also. If you touch a hot pot, you will move your hand from that particular pot, isn't it? Same goes for the dog encountered a painful stimulus, so it will withdraw the leg from that particular, the flexion reflex is there. But there is a delay which in this case, in the dog encountering a painful stimulus, the delay lies between 60 to 200 milliseconds, very few seconds of time. So this is latency. This is a property of a reflex. There is a delay between giving a stimulus and having the response. Then comes summation. Summation is sometimes individual neurons respond only after they have received several post-synaptic potential. And now, right now, I am assuming that you people are aware of what are post-synaptic potential. And if you are not, please kindly write down in the comment section. I'll make a separate video for that. So summation, as the word suggests, basically they are summing up the individual neuron can only respond when it received all postsynaptic potential. Excuse me. So they are able to add up excitation coming neither at different times, temporal summation जिसको आप कहते हैं, and from different places, that is the spatial summation. Basically summation means that all the responses are added up. So even if it is an excitation or inhibition, the response is coming all together, coming either at different times, temporal summation you see, or from different places, that is called spatial summation. So in complex behavior there is summation. Okay, then comes inhibition. So within the nervous system, nerve cells actively inhibits each other's transmission or information. So in nervous system you see there is inhibition also, right? It inhibits certain kind of responses. So in complex behavior, three properties are always there. First is the latency, there is delay between stimulus and its response. There is summation, all the neurons basically they add up to give a response, and there can be an inhibition, right? So nerve cell actively inhibit each other also. So at the behavioral level, the prevention of one's activity occurrence while other is in progress, that means inhibition. For example, if you are talking and eating food at the same time, so when you gulp, so you cannot respire at the same time. If you are aware of that, when you gulp or swallow the food on that time, the basically the trachea is covered with epiglottis, and that is important. Basically what happens is, this is the food pipe and this is the windpipe. If you see, this is windpipe, this is food pipe. So when you inhale, there is a cover over this. When you swallow something na, so that covers basically cover the windpipe. Why it is covering? It is kind of a cartilage. It is covering so that food does not enter here. So the inhibition is also there na. When one action is occurring, the other is inhibited. Muscles also occur in this manner. Muscles basically when they contract, some muscles are antagonistic to each other. They are paired in that manner ki if one contracts, the other has to relax. So they limit each other's action. So this is very common in complex behavior, right? Finally, so there is analysis of behavior. So with this lecture you know that there are three kinds of behavior. We started from here na. There is instinctive behavior, which is fixed action. There is learning behavior, there is complex behavior. So finally, when you have you learned all about the three types of behavior, there comes the analysis of behavior, which is called the ethogram. So ethogram is a catalog or inventory of behaviors or action which is exhibited by an animal, and it is used in ethology to understand basically the variation. So behavior in an ethogram are usually defined to be mutually exclusive, and they are objective also, right? Example, a species may use a putative threat display which in the ethogram is given a descriptive name such as head forward or chest beating display. This is commonly seen in frog or toad, right? So head forward or chest beating display, this is the name which is given to a thread display, and not the head forward thread or chest beating thread. So you are understanding. So there is in ethogram the descriptive name can be different as per their actual meaning. The putative thread display has the name of head forward or chest beating display instead of the head forward thread or chest beating thread, because this display is for a particular species. For other species the display can be different. So some ethogram are even given a pictorial form, and not only the catalog the behavior that indicate the frequency of their occurrence and also the probability that one behavior followed another. So this is about the introductory part of the animal behavior. I hope you understand something from the lecture. If you do like this video, and if you want more lectures, comment it down, and if you have any kind of suggestion you can comment down that also. Share it with your friends who can be to whom this video can be helpful, and I hope to bring more lectures soon on this topic. Thank you so much.